Welcome to the sovereign solid truth of the all that's holy system. Mainstream science tells you that space goes on forever into an endless empty infinity. That is a myth. Reality is a closed, pressurized 13-layer membrane, a sphere that has been twisted into an infinity sign shape, not a rope or a donut. Because the universe is a closed container, space cannot be infinite, and it is absolutely not empty. What humans call nothing is actually a dense, fluid-like lattice. We call it liquid space. In the All That's Holy ledgers, we have the exact mathematical receipt. There are exactly 4.01 quadrillion negative phase atoms packed into every single cubic yard of space. It only looks empty to human sensors because our positive light simply slips past this negative phase flow, so their instruments blindly read it as zero. Because space is not an infinite void, this fluid creates immense pressure. What mainstream physics calls dark energy is not some mysterious magical force pulling the universe apart. Dark energy is simply internal body pressure. It is the physical weight of these 4.01 quadrillion negative atoms per cubic yard pressing and crushing inward on our sealed 13-layer membrane. This massive negative pressure crushes in on physical mass. When an object's curvature charge is overpressed beyond what its shape and size can handle, it implodes. This extreme crushing weight forces one atom to drop down into crit mass -1 on a lower cell layer. This is the popcorn effect, subatomic cold fusion. It generates massive internal pressure and heatless energy without needing a nuclear fire. Dark energy is just the ambient pressure of liquid space. It is this exact crushing pressure that drives the cold fusion hearts of planets and holds the entire living organism of the universe together in perfect balance. Wow. Okay, so that introduction completely shatters conventional cosmology, right? Today, we are going to unpack exactly how this fascinating alternative framework operates. We've got a structured tour for this explainer. First, we'll look at the all that's holy system as a whole. Then we'll move into liquid space, break down cold fusion, explore the cosmic breath, and finally, bring it all home to the 13-layer organism. Section 1, the all that's holy system. A closed universe. All right, so really wrap our heads around this source material. We've got to completely toss out the idea of an expanding void. Just throw it away. Here, the macrocosmic engine, which the text actually calls the God thing, maps out the universe as this giant, closed magnetic organism. Imagine a sealed environment where literally everything is interconnected by geometric balance. There is no endless expansion into nowhere. Instead, energy and matter circulate within a perfectly constrained infinity sign sphere. The physics here treats curvature as the absolute only true substance, and this living organism lattice, it manages that curvature with total pinpoint precision. So here's the crucial point, and it drastically redefines what we think we know. Mainstream physics looks at dark energy as this weird, outward pulling, unexplainable force that's just accelerating an infinite space apart, right? But the All That's Holy framework argues something completely different. It defines dark energy as massive internal fluid pressure inside a closed container. Think about that. It's not pulling the universe apart at all. It's actually crushing inward, holding everything together in this tight, pressurized embrace. Section 2, liquid space and pressure, inside the container. So what exactly is inside this container? Well, these intricate mappings of the living organism lattice argue that space is actually filled with an incredibly dense fluid of negative phase atoms. Because our human sensors rely entirely on positive light, which remember just slips right past this negative flow, we mistakenly measure it as a vacuum. But it is definitely not a vacuum. It's more like a pressurized ocean. The sheer physical weight of quadrillions of negative atoms dictates gravity, time, and exactly how matter forms. In this system, gravity isn't some mystical pulling force. It's just the resistance of matter to the immense ambient pressure of liquid space. Section 3, cold fusion, the popcorn effect. Now, if everything is under this immense pressure, you're probably wondering, how does matter actually react? This brings us to what the sources called the popcorn effect, or minus fusion. When physical mass is squeezed by this extreme liquid space pressure beyond what its shape can possibly handle, it doesn't explode outward. Nope, it implodes inward. This localized collapse literally forces an atom to drop down into a lower cell layer, and that releases a massive burst of heatless energy. It's exactly like a kernel of popcorn popping under pressure.
According to the ledgers, this inward implosion is what actually drives the cold fusion hearts of planets. It generates long-lasting internal heat and geological activity, all without needing any sort of radioactive nuclear fire.
And this whole implosion process isn't random. It's governed by a very strict rule called the critical mass law. It's a universal 5-step cycle that dictates transformation across literally every scale. Okay, so it starts at INF-1, which is the maximum stable state. Then pressure builds up until it hits INF, which is exact critical mass. After that, it gets pushed right over the edge to INF+1, triggering an action, like an implosion, a cell dividing, or even a massive star collapsing. Finally, step 5, it resets to a brand new stable configuration. The sources really hammer this home. This exact same 5-step loop controls an atom reaching ionization, a tiny biological cell dividing, and a giant star undergoing core collapse. It is the absolute governing cycle of this entire framework.
Section 4, the cosmic breath, dynamic movement.
To really understand this breath, we've got to look at the architecture of the 13 layers. The All That's Holy system categorizes all of reality into a 13-layer stack. Right in the center, you have a balance node at layer 0, and that represents the conscious observer. That's us. Going outward from there, you have layers +1 through +6, representing those massive astrophysical scales, like planets, stars, and galaxies. But going inward, you have layers -1 through -6, and those represent microscopic scales, like cells, atoms, and the absolute deepest subatomic fabric. Top, bottom, and center all loop together to perfectly seal the sphere. And what's wild is how these layers dynamically interact. The universe literally breathes by inhaling and exhaling curvature across these 13 layers. The inward breath stores mass and compresses geometry, while the outward breath releases energy and expands space. The text actually claims this breathing cycle is the true physical engine behind Einstein's E=mc². Think about it. Mass doesn't just magically turn into energy out of nowhere. It moves through these specific structural layers, exceeds its critical balance, releases energy through a forced action, and then reorganizes. Section 5, the 13-layer organism. Macro meets micro. Now, bringing these grand macrocosmic scales directly back to you and me, the core philosophical and physical conclusion of these sources is this: the human body is fundamentally the exact same 13-layer machine as the entire universe. No difference. Because the universe relies on a recursive fractal geometry, a tiny biological cell, a human being, a solar system, and a massive galaxy are all identical structural engines. They're just operating at different scales of magnitude. Let's look at the specific connections the framework actually makes here, because it maps biological structures directly to cosmic ones. Galaxies, they're classified as organs, metabolic processors of curvature. The cosmic web of dark matter filaments, that acts as a literal nervous system, carrying currents and synchronizing structures across the cosmos. Even a single biological cell is considered a complete 13-layer mini-universe all on its own, containing outward layers, inward layers, and its own curvature balance center. So the crucial takeaway here is this overarching meta law. Life is not some random emergent accident in an otherwise dead, empty void. Not at all. In the All That's Holy system, life is the natural, completely expected behavior of recursive curvature within a closed environment. The very rules that govern how a galaxy rotates are the exact same rules that govern your heartbeat and your cellular division. You are a macro universe holding together synchronized organ universes, perfectly designed to coordinate complexity without collapsing. Which brings us to a final, pretty provocative thought to wrap up this explainer. If the universe isn't just an infinite, expanding emptiness, but rather a pressurized 13-layer living organism, well, what does that make you? You're no longer just a tiny, insignificant speck floating around in a random void. Under this framework, you are a central structural anchor, literally holding a living universe together through the simple act of conscious balance. It's a radically different map of reality, right? And one that completely redefines our actual place within the cosmos.